special meeting of the Village of Franklin Council. We are not doing a roll call or a specific agenda, so Meg, I'll hand it over to you to let you decide in what order you want to handle things.
Sounds good. So today, this was one of two budget meetings that we had scheduled. The purpose of the meeting is to allow space for council and myself and staff to discuss budget allocations for this upcoming year. We're not making any final decisions today. It's a workshop. We're just talking through. Initially, when this was scheduled, the priority was to talk about the proposed police budget. It makes up a large portion of our budget in total, and it's worth having some time to look at it specially here. We've become more comfortable with the police budget. We've talked about it a lot, so depending on time, once we've moved through questions that we may have on the proposed police budget, we'll go ahead and cut Chief loose and let him off the hook here, and then have just broader budget discussion in general. We can talk about specific budget priorities that anyone may have, questions that you might have, I'm going to be able to answer. Again, today's not your last day to engage and to work through that. We will meet again before our regularly scheduled meeting on April 14th. So you have two supporting documents today in front of you. One is just a copy of this budget that we're currently operating off in whole. And the other one is separated out just the police funds. In the police budget, we've looked at the last 3 years and this coming year to provide a little bit of an analysis. You can benchmark and see where we've been over time. Chief and I are prepared to answer any questions about the specifics. If you have questions about where those numbers came from or where they're at, we can go ahead and give you all of that information here. Most of the budget is pretty consistent. It is laid out a little different. One of the things I'll draw your attention to right away is on your police budget for contracts, contractual service, which is on page 3 of 4, and it's in a green text box. You'll see that last year and this proposed budget, the difference is a lot. The reason isn't necessarily in the change in contractual services, it's for cleaner accounting. Chief and I had talked a lot about the structure of the actual PD accounts. And so one of the changes that we're making is that this year and moving forward, our contractual services will be shown together in an account. Makes it easier for us to analyze what we're doing in contractual services instead of having them spread out over multiple accounts. So we can go ahead and answer any questions that you have here. That's one of our main changes. After your questions, I'll have Chief give you a couple of his highlights, and then we can go from there.
So, just a couple of things. Do we have okay, so budgets. Is there any line item on here that's is the top one? Well, no, that's salaries. Do we have the aggregated budget for the police?
Wouldn't that be over here?
No, because the one you're looking at right there, David, is just the 2024, 2025. There's not a projection of 25, 26 on the blue.
Right.
This is the one that has the projection.
Yeah, so are you looking for a total amount?
Yeah.
Oh, I got
So on my figures here, I have this year that we would come in at 2 million, around 2,500,000. I can see that your 24-25 budget came in at 2,396,000 after it was amended.
David, were you talking about the PD aggregated budget?
Yes.
The 2.5 million?
I think it's both. Is the 2.5 village and PD or just PD?
Village and PD.
Is 2.5.
So what is could we just get just PDs aggregated?
No, I'm sorry, that's what I have for just the PD,
Yeah,
Fund
correct.
207, for expenditures, is about 2.5.
And then last year, with the amended budget was,
2513?
Yeah,
seen that. I'm on page 9 of 17. And
Okay.
then we have the estimated revenues, appropriations, and it looks like the appropriations are 2,634,290.
Right, but there's a balance. Isn't the prior page, the bottom line of that 570, isn't that the amended budget at the end of page 8? And then the next items are capital expenditures, and then the transfer in is the portion that,
Bingham Farms and other,
estimated revenues are 2634, but then there's a net out. And a, what's the fund balance? Is that just for emergencies?
yeah,
So I don't know, David, it's either 2634 or 2513. I'm not very good at these.
You're fine.
Because, again, I'm just trying to start the baseline conversation at, is like, where are we at with this budget comparatively to where we've previously been?
it's about a 5% rough increase to the previous budget. Again, this is just working budget, it's not a final budget,
Yeah, yeah,
there
yeah.
are no final numbers yet. But so far, what I'm looking at is about a 5% increase.
Yeah, I also am not good with this. As far as like just trying to figure out where it's at, because again, if the last one was the number that you were looking at, David, which is on page 8 of 17, that would indicate an ending balance last year of the 2,513,570. But then there's additional expenditures under capital expenditures, I believe, directly for the police. That would then bring it to
Yeah.
2634.
Yeah, so that's the
So
number.
it seems like there'd actually be a decrease.
Well, the 2.5 right now for you is just an
An
estimate of
estimate,
where
and
we
we
were at.
anticipate that it'll probably be about
Yes,
5%.
in general, my anticipation
Yeah.
is when we get those numbers honed into where they'll be, I
Mm-hmm.
think we're gonna shake out to about a 5% increase in just the PD budget.
Okay, and then, were there any major, the other thing too is just the way it printed for me, and I just assume that this is, clerical salaries appeared
Yes.
twice.
Oh, should just be once,
So on the first page, it's the bottom line.
Yep.
And then I found it identical on the second page in blue, like,
About halfway through.
Yep.
yeah.
Yep, so that's
Okay.
my error.
No,
that
you're
it's
good,
on
you're
there
good. I just
twice.
wanted, I was like, just double checking everything.
Not added twice into
Yep.
the figures that I'm using.
Yeah.
And when I go back and edit this document, I'll remove the one from the second page because I think it makes more sense on the first page. That's where we're talking about other payroll costs and salaries.
Okay. And then some of the things that I noted in here was, in a lot of areas, our 24, 25 percentage increases jump dramatically. So if you look at like holiday pay, it went from 9% to 40, almost 42%.
Yeah,
Payroll taxes went from 2.8 to 19.
yep.
What were some of the reasons for those dramatic increases?
Those are really, they're all the same reason. And that came at the cost of taking the part-time positions and making them full-time.
Got it.
Part-time positions don't accrue the overtime, they're not getting paid out for the holidays, we're paying less in payroll taxes. So adding those positions, which was approved during the budget amendment that happened in December, January time, changed and caused those dramatic increases that you see there.
Because I asked about this during the finance committee
Yes.
meeting where we were talking about the PD budget. I'm still not completely, and maybe Chief, you can help with this. I'm not completely, clear or settled, but with regards to the explanation, I might have been, just thinking back on the presentations that Chief Roberts gave us when he was contemplating this change, he asked for council input. And my recollection is this business case was, it will help with street coverage, it will help with cost management, even though certain items would go up, like pension, because we're assuming those. But I noticed that budgeted overtime hasn't gone down. I would have wondered if overtime would have gone down. Bottom line, my question is, from a management point of view, why is it better for us to have 12 or 13 full-time people versus a combination of full and part-time? Because the budget numbers don't seem to support that. So what's the compelling
Sure.
reason?
So having full-time people is gonna be more expensive. The idea for me, and I did push this quite a bit with Chief Roberts, is I did want to move to all full-time, because I want consistency in training. I don't want people that come to work once a month and maybe have trained a couple of times a year. I know across the board what everyone's doing, how everyone's training. We're all trained the same. They have interactions with me on a daily basis, and I think that consistency is a better product for the community, and I also think it reduces liability.
The other thing is that those part-time positions became hard to fill. And with those being hard to fill, and we have them, they're not filled, that was putting a strain on overtime. And as we thought long-term strategic planning for the department, to continue to have to rely on our full-time individuals accruing more and more overtime to cover the fact that these part-time shifts we just can't keep kind of consistently filled, I believe that was part of the rationale. Now, that wasn't part of those conversations, would have came in after that. Ideally, honestly, those changes, and there was a bit of a breakdown of information, those changes probably should have been just reflected in your budget that you adopted last year. Now, I can't attest to what the process was there, but for whatever reason, they didn't make it there, so they didn't show reflected in your budget until you got into December, and now we're seeing those increases kind of, they feel like they came out of nowhere. But these should have been conversations that we were having last year around budget time, when we were getting rid of the part-time positions and moving to full-time.
So here's another completely and totally unfair question, but
Okay,
I'm
I'm
gonna
ready.
ask it. Because again, we all travel in the community, and my question really is, Chief, if we were to ask you to reduce your budget, and we've never asked the PD to do that I can think of, but let's say we needed to, where would you reduce your budget?
I mean, really, I would think that a majority of your costs are with personnel. So if the board mandated or asked me that, you have to reduce your budget, it's gonna be manpower. This is really a zero-based budget. Everything that I have put in here is accounted for. The only thing that is miscellaneous expenses and police supplies, which is $2,300. That means over a period of 12 months, there's $2,300 to buy something that I didn't account for already, right? So it's a very low amount. So I feel like Meg and I really drilled down and tried to give you guys a responsible budget here. But if you're looking at saving a couple $100,000, then you're talking about an officer position.
If you were asked to justify, so the increases, and I totally understand the flip to full-time hiring and the reasons for that, but if you had to justify, if someone were pressing you to show the ROI on that investment of hiring those full-time officers, are there any reductions in the amount of, incidents in the community? Do we see better outcomes for the community that could point to a justification for budgets?
Can I go?
Yes, you may.
So, in almost every other function of government, we can look at a return on investment, and you would be able to say, like, reduced incidences in the community, or more tickets that are written. You know, but when you look at public safety, not just in Franklin, in anywhere, that's not an effective measurement. Because in reality, if your police are doing a fabulous job, what the output is probably less. They're writing less tickets because people aren't speeding. They're, you know, responding to less crime. So it can be really difficult to measure it on an output. That's something that we would see reflected in our police, the report that they give every month, right? It's really hard to track that down to an output of where that investment is. What you would want to do, one of the areas that you could is, go really closely, do a deep dive into your overtime and your personnel and look at that. Now, we're looking at this at a high level, right? And I have just rough estimates of your percentage of change here. But without the extra officers, anticipating and, you know, calculating how much overtime would have accrued, that would be one measurement, not the only measurement of where, you know, there could be a cost savings in there, but definitely a critical one. The other thing is to Angelina's point, turnover is one of the most expensive costs that any organization can face. And so having more invested, reliable, full-time officers over here is significantly less turnover. So over the course of their employment here, you could look and see what the average cost is to bring on a new officer, onboard them, equip them with all the equipment, fit them into the schedule, do all of that. You know, there's definitely a cost associated there. When we were having these part-time positions, one, those turn over a lot faster. Two, they were harder to fill. What we have been fortunate to do is when we converted these full-time positions, we were able, in large part to Chief and officers that he's known throughout his career, able to bring over some quality officers over here who are invested, who we have no reason to believe wouldn't be here for a long term, and really build on the retention that we have of that department. So if you were going to estimate dollars and numbers, that would be another area that you would look at for that.
I've mentioned this before, and it becomes more and more true each day. Other departments are trying to poach our people. I just sent an officer over to Macomb County for a evidence tech school, and 3 different departments approached him about leaving here. So, and that is kind of reflective of the, I know we're not talking about the contracts today, but really I think Meg and I spent a lot of time, and Meg did a really nice job with that contract, because it really put us in the middle of the pack and made us at least competitive. And you have a young group of officers that truly, there's a lot of value there, and they want to be here. So I would just encourage you to, you know, keep that in mind. At the end of the day, you're the bosses, and we'll do what you want. But you've got a good thing going here, and like I said, I think this is a pretty responsible budget. The overtime, something to think about with the overtime is that because I put so much emphasis on training with the officers, a lot of times I do have to backfill on overtime to make sure there's coverage on the road.
Okay, so a couple of things. I will be interested if we could get a breakdown of just like the aggregated budgets through these years that are reflected. That'd be helpful, because as we have this conversation, well, one, as I look through the numbers, I see a lot more increases than I see decreases. And so I'm just wondering where we land at 5%. Not that, certainly, I'm not saying that we won't, but just, I think being able to see it will be easier. The other thing is that as I look at a budget and I see that if we're at 5% from where we were the previous year, and the previous year's not far off of 5%, like that's a very reasonable and an indication that you're doing cost benefit, right? You're what you're prioritizing for your staff, you're also subtracting elsewhere in the budget to offset that. I think you had previously talked about training being an emphasis, and that's reflected in the budget. There's an increase in training, but I'm sure that was something that you were mindful of to kind of do subtractions elsewhere in the budget. One thing that I did notice is, again, if we look at a reflection of the 2020, I have 2 questions coming out of this, but 2022 to 2023 for salaries to then 2025, 2026, it looks like it's about a 30% increase. However, is there, I would imagine that also accounts for an increase in full-time salary, because the part-time probably were not accounted for as salaried. Is
Yeah,
that true?
I believe it was a different budget line for
It was.
part-time people, yes.
Okay, so that makes sense. Do we know, and this is an impossibility to really give me a direct, but if we had a new officer, how much would that cost? The reason that
I
I'm
would have to
wondering
break
is,
down the numbers. I think to get a new officer here, you're probably gonna have to start them at top pay. Everyone right now is at top pay within the police department, but I think if you bring in another officer, especially an officer with experience, and really the sweet zone for me is 5 or 6 years experience somewhere else and bringing them over here, you're gonna be at top pay, plus benefits,
okay,
overtime.
What would that top salary amount be? Sorry, are you
and it
asking-
can, yeah,
are you
that
asking
that
like
is,
total
Roughly, I
cost
can
of-
Yeah,
give you
rough,
like
rough,
a
very
rough
rough,
idea off the top of
extremely
my
rough.
head is about, like, well, that's not what our officers are making
No,
at
but if
top
you-
pay.
no, I'm just,
Including benefits,
Yeah.
upwards of $150,000, probably more like $175,000 when you break down all the benefits and then the pension obligations that we would have
Yeah.
on there. And that's not salary, of course.
right,
Top pay for our officers just roughly is $89,000 to $90,000. Is
Yeah,
that where
with-
we're
With the new
at?
contract we were
But that's not
discussing-
with benefits, just
Yeah.
Yeah, I think
salary.
we're in the high 80s.
okay,
And that brought us to midpoint throughout of Oakland County.
yeah,
So, I have kind of some totals for the last few years, and I can get you guys all this information as it pertains to the PD budget. Interesting, where we saw the largest increase was between, 22, 23, and 23, 24. You went from having a total police budget in 22, 23 from about $2.1 million. And then you go to 23, 24, and your total police budget jumps to $2.8 million. Then you go back down last year, so I'd have to get you the exact, but it's around like 2.5. And then my numbers this year are bringing us in at about 2.65.
real quick, just on that big jump that happened in
Yeah.
2022 to 20, did we do a lump sum into pension payment,
Yes.
right?
But that, we can see, I looked at that, so you can see that, let me grab your budget on which line item you have it here. It was almost a $500,000 that was awarded.
Yeah.
It was a state grant program, and those funds allowed us to increase our retirement, contributions and, oh, unplug the speaker. And I think that was, I'm just gonna close out
Yeah,
of
it's on the,
this
yeah, you're
Zoom.
good, you're good. It's
Okay.
on the second page, third
Mike
in
is
green.
with us now. Yeah, so you can see it, that there, second page. And that would have changed the overall budget. We looked at that to try and help explain. Correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't 22, 23 a negotiation year? It was a 2-year contract.
Oh, 2 year.
That one was a 2-year contract.
Could have been.
Because negotiation years are, obviously, you see increases there as well.
Mike's on, it looks like.
Yeah, I think Mike has joined us here. Let me try and get the speaker working here. We can hear you. It's just quiet. Let's- Okay. Yeah.
Just so he can see, because that is exactly what you said.
Yep.
No one's speaking right now. Nobody was saying anything.
Can you hear us, Mike?
Oh, he can't. So he can't hear us, Meg. Oh.
It's giving us too much feedback.
Giving us reverb.
Can we turn, oh, this is for the videotaping.
Yeah, I don't know. There's nothing that I can do about the sound on that. This is giving us too much feedback here.
And it's being recorded, but it's not live.
Correct.
Can he submit his questions in the chat
Uh,
or make comments?
We can't hear us.
Oh, he can't hear us.
No.
Let's log off and log back on. We can continue the conversation. Let me work on this Zoom.
Just real quickly, to trustee Sally's point, I just shared with Meg, I have an activity report from the last 4 years, so all of council saw this, but just so that if you have questions, trustee Sally, you don't have to come back to the chief, so I'm just gonna pass this down, just so you know.
Recording in progress.
But that was as of 12/31/24, so those numbers for this year aren't complete.
Are we still on the question of when the pension funding came in? Is that what we're still looking for?
No, because I think, my point being is that, yes, there was a spike in 2022, 3 to 2024, but that is, if you remove the $500,000
Right.
in contribution, then that would put it at 2.3, which is roughly where we've been doing that steady increase.
Yes. So when I look at this as a whole and comprehensively, you do see continued steadied increases. Other than the large jump that we have when we have all the pension funding, the increase is pretty consistent and across the board there. Costs are continuing to rise, and I would expect to see similar increases in the budget as a whole for the village too. I would be curious to see where those are. We all know that costs are continuing to increase there, so.
This is a question for Chief. Just, I know that one of the revenues, very limited revenue, is forfeiture. Are there any other revenue streams for police departments or no?
So, once a year, we do sell a police vehicle, which brings us
Oh.
anywhere from $10,000 to $12,000. In this upcoming budget year, we will not be selling a police car, so what we're gonna do is we're gonna go from 4 patrol vehicles to 5. And one of the reasons is that when we switch over the cars, we have to take 2 cars out of service, basically, to get the new car. So we're down to 2 cars. And then those 2 cars are being driven for weeks, 24/7. And I think when we have, Labor Day and we have different events, I would like to have an additional vehicle. So you're not gonna have that revenue of about $12,000 in this next budget year.
Okay.
Additional sources of revenue. There are often grants that are related over to the police department. We've seen on average about $2,000 a year. We have grants or funds that are awarded to us for training that come through and cover a large portion of our training here. Just looking at the budget in general, obviously the SAD calculations for Bingham Farms, as well as what Bingham Farms pays, which is 35% of our overall budget, is a factor here when looking at revenues for this. There's a very small police millage right now, and it brings in some funds there. Let me see if I can find you that number. It's I think under $50,000. You also have fines, obviously forfeiture that we're talking about over there, right? Go ahead.
So we have reimbursement from the court. So if we have OWI drug cases, we do ask for reimbursement for prosecution. So we're getting small checks in all the time. You get a very small portion of the ticket costs that come back to the village. They don't go directly to the police department, unlike what a lot of people think. We're also have grants, right? So we're doing accreditation this year. We got 2 grants, 2 from the Michigan Association of Chiefs of Police. That's gonna cover a couple of $1,000s there. We also put in for several RAP grants for the new Axon system, which is our camera system, and the new tasers that we're getting. So we're hoping to get that from MMRMA as we probably find out next couple of months.
Yeah. One of the things I think that we should build in is potential increase in costs for cars because of the tariffs. Because if they're 25% more expensive.
So when I put the number in this budget, we weren't talking about tariffs. And the state contract right now, when I called the dealerships, was about $55,000 for our Ford Explorer. Now, that's not outfitting the Ford Explorer, that's just for the Ford Explorer. You need another between 10 and 20,000 to outfit the vehicle. I don't know what this is gonna look like when we go out to try to buy a car in August. I just don't, so we might have to come back and talk about that.
Is there any way to extend the life of the current fleet, as a stopgap?
So, yeah, so one of the vehicles that we have is the pickup truck, and that was purchased through Bingham Farms, SAD. And it is due to be turned over as far as years, but when I look at the mileage, we're gonna go ahead and keep that car another couple of years.
And you'd mentioned grant-funded programs for things like training. Is that 25K and 25, 26? So it jumped from 7K up to 25,675?
So part of that is also education reimbursement.
Okay.
But yes, the training budget did increase. Like I have that right here. I want to say that it doubled, but let's see here. Officer training is $12,000. Supervisor training is $1,500. We have OCTAC fees, which is a consortium with Oakland County. And then tuition reimbursement is up to $12,000.
Okay.
And do you know what was the year that we went from with the additional staff? For the part-time to full-time salary?
This year, right now.
Okay.
So it was not recognized in the initial budget for this year. It did not officially hit our books until we passed that budget amendment, which took place December, January timeframe.
Okay. So, just trying to account for, because we have that, what was it, roughly about 80,000 increase from 2022 to 2023 with no increased staff. That's just what it was. Then we have about another 80,000 jump, but that 80,000 jump is where we made the change from the part-time to the full-time.
Yes,
And we didn't hire one of them, and now that reflection in the 2025, 2026 is the addition of the person, right? Because did we fill both
no,
full-time
there's
positions?
still one available, so yes, and
Okay.
the other factor that you're seeing there, because you still have that increase, is because
Yep.
it was a contract negotiation year.
Yeah,
So
yeah, of
salaries
course,
are gonna
right.
bump,
Yep.
so that 4.47% that I'm showing there is gonna be for the other position that we could fill,
Mm-hmm.
and the increases that have taken place as a result of the contract negotiation.
One item of interest to you, there's a significant increase, was the Axon camera system. So that contract ends in June. We're signing a new contract. Now, Axon has basically got the business and all the police
Yeah,
departments. You're talking about over a 5-year period of over $160,000 for the camera system and the new tasers. Previously, that was taken out of forfeiture. Now, we've gotten the forfeiture down to a point where that's not sustainable, and we can't even do it this next year. So that's an increased cost in 25, 26 of a little bit over $41,000. That wasn't in the budget previous.
Okay. And just out of general curiosity, where does forfeitures come in? Like, how does a forfeiture occur?
So you have both state forfeiture, and then you have federal justice forfeiture. You also have treasury forfeiture. For the most part, our federal forfeiture is hovering right around $7,000. And where you would get that, unless you have someone in a federal task force, is you have a federal agency that comes into the community, we assist them, and we get a portion of those assets, right? When we had someone assigned to net, or if you have another county unit, those drug forfeitures would be split and then go into state forfeiture here. We're down into the lower 30,000s right now. There's a couple of purchases I'd like to make that I'll talk to the board about in April here. That won't be coming out of the general budget. We'll take it out of forfeiture.
Okay. Thank you.
There was some talk a couple years ago about declining forfeiture money, and I don't remember whatever happened with the state. Was there, are you still expecting forfeiture funds to come in?
I'm not aware of any other forfeiture that is owed to us. I do know that I had several federal forfeiture task forces before, and the money takes a year to 2 years to
Okay.
come in.
Okay, all right. Thanks.
Yep.
And then, so similar to the police budget, or sorry, the salaries for police officers went up about 29% from the 2022, 2023 to 2025, 2026. And then clerical salaries from 2022 to 2023 to 2025, 2026 went up 32%.
Yes.
Was there any addition to staff, or what's the adjustment there?
So what came about was, I remembered that trustee Hanson had brought this up last year, was that she was concerned about what our clerical staff were getting paid. I did kind of a deep dive into exactly what they're doing on a daily basis. And I've also given them a lot more tasks since I've shown up here. Stephanie Longworth has basically almost become my executive assistant. She's doing all of tracking of the numbers, doing our monthly reports. She's doing the payroll, and then I have her doing special projects. We've moved her from 3 days a week to 4 days a week, and she still is getting paid $21 an hour. So I did move her up to $26 an hour. Rose Murdoch, who's our other clerk, is just working 1 day a week. She got a $2 raise. Heather, who does all of our social media, and it's not just coming up with the content. She has to monitor that account all day long because, you know,
Yeah.
who knows
Yes.
what's gonna happen on that,
Right.
right? So she went up from, I think it was 550 to 625 a month. And then we have another clerk who's a former officer, Kimberly Bonakorski, who comes in a few hours a week at $22 an hour to do our lien validations, which is a state mandated thing that we need to do.
Okay.
So those increases, most of those increases are, you know, we gave a little bit extra money to Stephanie for all the work that she's doing for me.
I think that we can also, when we look at it as a trend, you come out of COVID, a lot of these jobs were increasing dramatically in cost. It got to the point where you could get a job at McDonald's for $18 an hour. So when you look at it over the last 4 years, it's increasing. 30% is dramatic, but when you look at that in context of these positions and how they've increased it, not only in government, but across the market, I think that what we'll see is that this has been very consistent.
Yeah, so we'd previously had a conversation around the benefit of moving to if we pass the threshold of 20 employees,
Yes,
that we can receive a benefit.
yes.
If we have one of the clerical staff working 4 days a week, do we start moving, could we potentially structure in a salary similar to what we did with Roger to put them on as salary? And we have to think about the total cost
Yep.
overall with the benefits, and then prorate it at 80% for the 4 days. So we wouldn't be pushing her to 5 days, we'd keep it at the 80%, but then could potentially get us to that 20 to get the additional incentives elsewhere in the budget. It's just something to consider.
Absolutely, no, I think that those would all be good numbers to run. I can't attest
Yeah.
off the top of my head if that math would math, you know, if doing that would actually, and then us receiving a change in our benefits for having so many full-time employees and the cost benefit there, but that's definitely a figure that I can look at and consider. I think that as we have, like Chief mentioned, he's using this clerical staff in different ways than they have before, taking on more roles and responsibilities. It might not even be out of the realm of possibilities that at some point all of that a full-time position is needed over there. Honestly, we had 2 part-time positions. One of those part-timers is kind of pulling back, the other one is picking up more hours, but we're already getting close to a point where any additional hours would really bump them into needing to be a salaried employer or something for us to look at. So that's all good feedback, and I think that that's something I can look into and see what the cost benefit would be of that.
And then the other question would be, so when we go into negotiations and the benefits that are provided to officers, does that extend to clerical staff, or would they be more in alignment with the staff in this office?
That's a really good question. So clerical staff, even as they stand now, are not bound by the contracts with officers, but rather the employee handbook, which is the same as my staff over here and myself. So they would continue to remain in line there. And increases or benefits given to officers in their contract would not necessarily go over there. They would be receiving the clerical staff would be receiving the same benefits as the staff that works in this village hall.
It's helpful, thank you.
What's the amount for health insurance? Because I saw there was about a 12%.
12% increase, yep, across the board. So we spent a lot of time with our vendor looking at that. If you went to any municipality, you're seeing between, some places have a 30% increase. So healthcare costs have increased dramatically. I know our partners in Bingham Farms are looking at a 12% too.
My question was, what percentage of what percentage of total premiums are contributed by employers versus employees? And that goes for employees only and also dependents and spouses.
I would have to get back to you on that number.
Yeah, we'd
It's-
have
it's
to
less
look.
than It's less than 20%. I want to say it's between 13 and 15%,
Is what employees are contributing?
but I can,
And what about for spouses and dependents?
Wait, can you grab Susan?
show.
Susan, what's a breakdown for benefits between employees and the village? It's not 80-20?
No, it's like 12% is what we're putting in, and then the rest is the village.
The village, okay. Okay, so like 88-12?
80-20.
Okay,
So employees are contributing 12%.
Yes, ma'am.
Correct.
So the national average would be lower than that. So employees typically would cover a higher percent. Would that be a cut you would consider making? So employees would shoulder a larger burden of their,
What's the national average,
Benefits.
Abs?
I just did a benchmarking study yesterday. It's, somewhere between 72 and 78% is what employers would contribute. And that's for employee-only plans. For spouses and dependents, it's normally like 65, 70%.
it'd be difficult to do that this year, we'd have to reopen the contract negotiations. So I think that wouldn't be a decision that I would be able to make over here, that would depend on what we could negotiate with the union.
I guess in line with the information that Abby just gave us, what is the parity with other police departments or municipalities, or what is your data? I'm sorry,
Oh, I'll pull it up.
is your data about municipal, or is it corporations?
It's gonna be
Because I'm wondering
Yeah, 'cause that
how,
would be
It's gonna
really
be more
different.
corporate.
where are we
This-
comparatively?
So this was, so the data we pulled, so there's 3 different reports. There's the Kaiser Family Foundation, which is, you can segment based on small, mid-sized, larger teams, typically private organizations. But there's another data set, which is, it's either Athena or something else, where it does segment based on both public and private organizations. So it does give some line of sight to overall benefits costs on average for municipalities or private organizations.
And even further than just public, that would be something you would look at for police in general and comparatively what contracts are offering, because as we know, that's its own game too. So, yeah, it would definitely be,
But in, like, for instance, 2024 across the board, companies saw an average of a 7.3 increase and 7.3% increase in healthcare costs.
but for private.
Sure. I'm just saying, like, there's some, might there be some opportunity to renegotiate the contract or find a new opportunity for benefits at all?
I doubt a new opportunity for benefits because we have had extensive conversations with our vendor at this point. We've gotten it down to the 12%, and like I said, they made us aware of other municipalities of our size are looking at more like a 30% increase this year. And I know for a fact that Bingham Farms is also at the 12% increase. So I don't think that these healthcare increases would be solved by moving providers. Possibly renegotiating a contract, but before I would even say that we could do that, I would look at other contracts and see what they're offering, obviously. So that it's definitely something that we can look into, but the cost that we're seeing increasing here isn't a result of our actual provider. It's the market that we're in right now with the other municipalities.
But are we looking at, sorry, Abby, you had a second point of the percent that the village is fronting of the healthcare plans?
Yeah, so this would be for the employer share. Granted, this might be a segment of both private and public companies. So the average employer contribution toward benefits costs would be somewhere between 70 and 80%.
And we're saying that it's at 88 right now.
Right.
And I'm saying that earlier this year, we already went through all the possibilities of the other plans that we had and how that would change our coverage and change the distribution. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
Yeah,
Met-
I went through all of that.
Met extensively with our provider to look at the other plans, talk to other municipalities about what they were expecting and how they were going to fund these changes and where those costs were gonna be going. Even before the contract opened up, we went over to the PD, looked at all the plans that were available, looked at the portion for what the village would be responsible for and for the individuals. Having under 20 employees made it difficult for what plans that we could actually apply for and what would come over here. And we could make marginal cost savings by downgrading the health insurance plans that were provided to our individuals. So instead, we decided to up the amount that the employees are going to be responsible for to maintain the same level of coverage. But lots of work was done on that in the fall leading up into this. And so I can say that plans were looked at very comprehensively, both over here, and we took them over to the PD when we were looking at them.
Have you ever looked at any other, so there's like standard brokerage types of firms to offer benefits, healthcare benefits. Like there might be more tech-forward, self-service options that leverage the open marketplace, where you can cap benefits costs based on a budget and allow for employees to choose the plan. So it's not a plan that's being chosen for them. For instance, if you have a young officer who's relatively healthy and doesn't have a family and may only seek coverage or like medical attention for an annual visit, but they don't need any other comprehensive care. They would get a set budget, but they might choose a less coverage option because it's, you know, they could stand to either recoup the gap between those things, or it just reduces the cost to the village at all. But it tailors these plans and is flexible for the employee rather than this sort of choice.
I do think that it's important when we're thinking about the context of that to think of the staff that's administrating this, which is one person, Susan.
Right, but like a plan like
And so
that-
opening up all of these plans, educating all of the staff on them, troubleshooting, helping them inevitably, dealing with 18 different plans that we all have, going through, you know, like, there is a level of administration that we need to be cognizant of. We need, keeping a uniform plan across for us makes it easier for us to administer over here, especially since I only have one person doing that.
Right, but what if the administration was also supported by that organization rather than our team? So instead of the administration and open enrollment every year falling on one person to do, it becomes that platform and their support team's job to say, hey, you have a question about claims, or you have a question about your plan or providers. You know,
It would
that
be,
could-
again, another conversation that you'd have to have with PD contract negotiations, because in there are terms like, how quickly is Susan going to respond to this? Who do I go to have this done? How is this going to get done? So I can tell you right now that those would be questions that the union would want answer to, and saying that there's this large conglomerate that you can call a phone number and somebody's gonna be able to help you, that's gonna be a tough sell over there for them. Not that they're not things to look at in the future. I wouldn't recommend, I mean, we're already 6 months past 4 months past the union contract right now. I would say it's too late to go back and look at that. So next time that comes up, looking at those type of possibilities could definitely be something that we look into.
So my recommendation would be, I completely agree that we don't need to interfere with the negotiations at all, right? Like, that's a danger for everybody, including the village. I do think that this is a good topic to take, not for the next opportunity to negotiate, but to explore as the people committee. Because I think
Sure.
leverage the expertise that we have.
Yeah, so I like Abby's idea that we can't do it in police negotiations, we're contracted for 3 years, but we could pilot that idea for village staff. But what you said made me think, right now, police call Susan with healthcare questions?
Yeah.
Not medical questions.
No.
No, this would be like,
But
Bad
Susan is our HR representative.
Yeah,
here.
but I'm just like they're calling her of like coverage?
I manage the HRA, so.
She's
I need
privy to.
reimbursement and stuff.
Yeah, but if they had a question about coverage, they'd be calling like Blue
They
Care,
call- They call directly to.
Blue Cross Blue Shield or whoever.
Yeah, or
Okay.
call here and we put them in touch with our contact is actually what happens.
If they
Town
don't know,
hall.
then I will say, hey, here's who you can reach out to. There's some hand-holding.
There's a lot of
Yeah, I'm
hand-holding.
thinking of how many times I've interacted with my HR and it's not a lot.
and all this to say, I'm not even saying this is the best course of action, but I work a whole lot with bootstrapped small organizations who are also making these trade-offs around how do we attract talent versus what sort of opportunities do we have to afford these things, whether it's salaries and or coverage, the total compensation piece. And so, and there are trade-offs. And again, this is not to say this is the best recommendation. It's just, if pressed, if we're to say, are we utilizing our budget as a village in the best way possible? My questions are really like, how do we justify these things? And are there other options to perhaps recoup budget that might be used elsewhere, maybe in your budget?
Sure.
You know?
But I would say, your first question was there, are we looking at other options? Are we using the best? Yes, we are vetting other options. Yes, this was a large discussion that was had leading up to this. Is there other avenues that we can look at? Sure, the people committee would be a great place to start spearheading that, but let's not cross wires and insinuate that we've just continued to roll with the same healthcare plan and absorb costs when that's not the case. A lot of work went into this in the fall to find the best deal for us here as a village and to take care of our employees. So, yes, there are other things out there. That can be a discussion of the people committee. I don't think it would be wise to interfere with negotiations, and I'm not hearing that here. But none of these decisions have just been made. These took a great deal of Susan and I's time this year to vet through and get to this point.
Yeah.
Did we end up changing vendors after your guys' market research?
No, we raised the cost, because changing vendors, we would have sacrificed the coverage we were receiving. Would have saved money or kept money consistent, it would have definitely changed the coverage we were able to provide. Hence the increase of the 12% that's reflected in the budget.
What would the change of coverage have meant, like in terms of?
Do you
the
remember?
cost, the change of cost on overall? in the budget?
All different, like, we have
It's
a,
all over the place.
yep,
Um,
just like completely different plans.
I have to pull the information.
Yeah, I don't know.
I don't wanna speak off the top. of my
No, and I don't think this is the appropriate venue for that. I think a benefit discussion would be good in the people committee.
Yeah.
Anyone else? I have one question, just curious what you're doing to knock 20 grand out of the communications budget?
Sure, so that was moved into contractual, and I can tell you
Okay.
specifically what that was. The Clemis record system, which is the county-based system that we write all our reports, and we can,
All right, so that just moved.
That's-
To
yeah.
that increase.
10,500. There is the air traffic solutions, which is our speed limit signs, which actually, we're able to mine data from that. So we, someone calls and says, my God, people are driving 60 and a 25. We can look and see that that's not quite true.
No, we're good, and
Yeah.
I remember you saying you had combined a couple of those into
Yeah.
Yeah.
contract service. Okay.
Yep.
And there was just one other one that we did as well. So there was 3 things that moved out of the communications line into contracts.
Okay. Angelina?
Nope, I'm good.
Okay.
All right, so
Chief,
that's,
thank you.
Thank you
Yeah,
very much, I
well,
appreciate it.
let Chief go here. It is about 6 o'clock. We do have to end just before 7 because we've got HDC coming in here right after that. But that gives us about another 50 minutes or so for you guys to have open discussion about budget priorities or ask questions that extend beyond the PD section here.
I think once we get the proposed budget, we can get into a little bit more detail. One of the things that I did see, so areas where there's a reflection of the amended budget, never mind. But there was a portion where there we go. On page 5 of 17, the last blue block, road and street construction,
Yeah,
13-mile road, $50,000. Franklin Road sidewalks, $30,000. Was that an allocation that we made for contract, or for engineering that we never expended?
well, I think some of that was expended. I mean, they're clearly, I can get you what the actual activity was, I wouldn't
Yeah.
know that. But when I showed those proposed sidewalks up and down 13, there's clearly extensive engineering that's already been completed on
But
it.
I don't think it's happened in the past year. I think we had intended for traction from either the subcommittee on sidewalks or from planning that never actually went forward. We're still relying on the HRC engineering plans from a few years back.
That could be the case here. I have them, and we can look at that. And I can definitely look into that. But I know when I'm coming in, we're still paying bills for HRC that are huge all last spring. And there's a lot of engineering that's going in there. I mean, some of those were on our, not this past bill list,
Yeah.
but the one before. And I had to say, those are from last spring. I don't even know, those would have all been projects under a different council and a different administrator. But I'm under the impression that engineering was still being expended for last year on those sidewalks, because when I came in, one of the first things I did was stop that. I stopped any random engineering or work that was being done on the sidewalks and the pathways.
I have no idea. That's what I'm saying. Is like, I do think it is worth that if they're billing us for it, say, deliver the work product.
So I guess what I'm wondering is, I know there was some comments a little while back.
I'm just gonna see if there's.
Someone had commented on it because it had something to do with we were paying late fees and things like that. Was, under the prior administrator, were we not getting our bills out on a timely manner where you could be paying invoices for work done in a prior fiscal year?
Okay, so I do think that was happening, but I don't know that that was under your it was under your prior administrator, but from what I saw predominantly, it was, I'm hesitant to even give my 2 cents because it is just like, but from my perspective, what was
We've
going
been on
on
this
is,
path for a while now. is
we
a
had-
Deep dive into HRC's
Yeah.
billing.
Yeah.
and it was explained to me that between Roger and HRC and to some extent, maybe some of our other contractors, McKenna or Plant Moran, that they were cognizant of where they were billing and when they were billing. And so there would have been, I don't know what the rationale was, but that there were, can you grab Susan for me
They were
as well?
spending a lot of time and effort on Irving Pathway.
Yeah, and that was in here,
possibly-
$10,000.
Oh, so that's separately line item.
It was, but we were paying bills every time Nancy was knocking on doors to see if she could get easements, which is not where the project was at.
Right.
So I come in and get an introduction to the engineering work that we're having done and continually hit with these giant bills for almost retroactive work. We're gonna been in the year, but a different fiscal year. And so I halted everything until further notice. There is no ongoing engineering that's required on these projects.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
that has been consistent since I've been in over here. Not that I don't think that, it's ever going to be necessary, but that's hence the strategic planning meeting that we had before, is that I want us to be intentional about where we're putting money. Engineering funds add up quickly, and,
Yeah.
and we have seen that. Do you know that last year, if we were paying HRC bills for engineering on the 13-mile road?
I think we were.
I do too.
Yeah.
I'm pretty sure we were. So those are good questions. I can do a deep dive and pull HRC invoices and let you kind of see where those were falling. And we can go ahead and look at that activity and bring that information to the next budget meeting. But yes, and probably knowing what you paid out to HRC last year would be helpful. I mean, even though that's reflective of other projects too. Because I think it's significant. You were paying significant engineering costs
Yeah.
I would have tons of bills.
for things that
Okay.
maybe didn't need to go to engineering. That were helpful. HRC does a great job. They're great consultants, but there are certain things that staff and administrators should be trying to spearhead in an effort to be conservative with our funds before we're just turning it over
Yep.
to HRC. And they were cognizant of that too, because when I came in and had my initial meetings with them and was like, we're spending what, where, doing what, even Nancy was very transparent with the fact, like, these are things that you're paying this hourly rate for, where these are phone calls and letters that could be sent from an administrator. Thus leading me to stop all of that work. Now, I don't have numbers and I wasn't here for that, but I can get them. I can show you what your activity and what you paid out in HRC was last year. When I was initially looking at this budget, those are the areas where I think you're gonna have funds that now you can reallocate. There's not a lot of fat in this budget, and you can look at it in a lot of different ways, but there was, allocation of funds that were not projects that were priorities. And that's what we're trying to mitigate, and that will create a little pool of money that would allow us to identify priorities for this council and allocate them this year.
So, do you want?
Can you just stay?
I was just a little confused about the HRC and 13 Mile Road discussion. So my understanding is that that at some point, at council's request, some engineering work was done on 13 Mile Road to determine whether or not a pathway was, a sidewalk, a path was feasible, and if so, what were the issues and on which side of the road it would be?
That wasn't last year.
That was
years ago.
2022.
Yeah, that was
Couple
right
of
after
years
the
ago.
charter got.
That was 2022, the work starts, and that does the first side of the engineering.
Okay.
Then you go back to HRC and say, what does it look like on the other side of the road? And they redo all the engineering extensively for the other side of the road. And that's why you have north
The other side
and
being the
south
south side.
sides.
So
to
north
look
was
at.
first?
Yes.
Yeah.
But I need to interject a question, comment that is baffling me, which the request to HRC was, tell us where to put this path. It wasn't, please analyze south, please analyze north, and then create a.
Yeah.
Who made the-
No, I mean, this is my thing, is like the entire time you were talking about HRC, I was just like, lawyer joke, like, don't make your lawyer your therapist because it's going to be really expensive.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's the same thing. If you don't go to HRC with a super narrow
Yep.
scope of work, then they have liberties to do with it what they want.
Yep.
Yeah, for me, it's like, who was making the request? Was
and
the
who was
language?
overseeing it?
It was the last administrator.
Yes.
So in his request, what were the requirements? Was it scoped? Did it have parameters? If not, they have free reign to say all this was included within your request, and then they send us a bill for the work after.
Yes.
And normally, you know, in contracts, you would say, this is out of scope, I'm not gonna pay for it. I'm guessing that wasn't done because the bills weren't even paid on time. And so they paid for anything they were billed for,
And you're not going to have a record to make any arguments back.
because nothing was in writing in the record management.
What we do have is the physical output from HRC, but I don't
Yeah.
have any way to trace back what
The
direction they would have been given. And for timeline, I can see that they did the north side engineering in 2022. And I know that it's about a year or so, maybe even later, when they do the south side. But that's all I have for timelines. Hence, my hesitation coming in and trying to get a feel for what HRC was actually doing, because they were over here all the time. And they were emailing all the time and we're getting all of this follow-up, but for what project are we even working on? You're chasing a trail, thank you for your engineering, we're not ready to obtain those easements yet. I don't need Nancy to be calling all the residents and knocking on doors trying to get easements, she doesn't even have the information she needs to do that. Same with, if you look at those renderings for that sidewalk, that's full engineering.
Yeah.
Like, that's a type of engineering that I don't know I would have recommended until we were even sure what side of the road we were gonna do, because it's wasteful to have done that much engineering for both sides of the road.
So I want to just kind of pick up on a point David made, which is, I don't recall seeing work output.
Yeah, no, and I specifically remember this conversation from last year because we had said, okay, we'll formulate a sidewalk committee, a subcommittee.
Yeah.
But we need to allocate resources for if we get to the point where we want engineering done, minimally to update what the
Yeah.
pricing would be from when it was done in 2023 or 2022, and then the others, we'll just say the work that was previously done. That's what we set those funds for, but we never moved forward with directing them to do anything, which is why I'm like, I flagged it in the budget to be like, this 80,000 really shouldn't have been touched.
Okay.
And I don't know that they were, I know
Yeah.
we paid a lot in HRC invoices, but I can't attest off the top of my head where they went to. To your point, not seeing work output, I've given you the work output that you got.
Okay.
And I did that in your strategic planning. I gave you every report that you were
Right here.
given
This-
and every
okay.
engineering,
Alright.
and that would have been the output. What we're missing is, what was that scope of work? What was the input? What were you doing? That I can't attest
Okay,
to.
okay.
But I have shared the output there, and.
Let me just re-clarify what I meant by that, because I've read through what you've given us. The purpose of that investigation was to tell us, allow us to make a decision, go or no go on a pathway from Inkster to Telegraph. What are the issues involved, so that we could have a project that could be ready to go should some funding become available.
I
That was
believe
my
we are
understanding.
shovel ready on those.
Okay.
They did full and complete engineering, so they went
Yep.
above and beyond even just deciding what side of the road.
Oh, yeah.
And what
They
was
talk
their
about fill,
recommendation?
like filling, what you have to
Yeah.
fill, what you have to construct, like,
North
it was
side
a
of the
full
road, but
analysis.
The south side of the road didn't make any physical sense
North
for
side of
them.
the road with crosswalks
Yep.
to the south side.
Yep, and that the south side of the road proposed too much of a financial strain and burden to get it to where it needed to be, and the easements in addition, the natural outlay of the land and the way they would have to fill to bring in the sidewalk. It was HRC's have a recommendation, 6 million for one, 4 million for the other, but they were saying north side with crosswalks would make more sense.
Correct.
Was there a discussion about what type of pathway? Because when I was knocking doors on the north side, a lot of the residents that lived were concerned about if there were a sidewalk put there, it should have a natural barrier such as like a bike lane path or maybe like a island or some sort of
berm or
segregation and not necessarily a sidewalk, but like, I think they call them a safety pedestrian trail
Yep.
or a bike road diet, something like that with more of a infrastructural prevention technique, because there have been cars that have landed in ditches on the north side of the road because there is very little shoulder, but even if they put a sidewalk, it's not like Franklin where you're going 25, so cars aren't gonna spin out. So like, they were like, not against sidewalks, they were concerned that someone walking on the sidewalk would get hit without a natural barrier or those bike lanes, or was only concrete sidewalks explored?
Concrete sidewalks.
Yeah, it was concrete, because if you go, again, just to summarize and not get on this point too long, but north side was deemed viable because south side had right-of-ways that pushed too far into where the sidewalk would naturally occur, which makes an assumption that you're talking about concrete pathways if you're talking about having to get into somebody's easement. If you were to do like a multi-use path that was an extension of the road, for instance, it probably would not get all the way into somebody's property,
Yeah.
but then you're running more into the problems that you're talking about, which is what type of barrier do you have between cars going 45 miles an hour and the people.
But see, my thing is if the safety increases tenfold and the cost only increases twofold, then it might be worth it to explore those other, safer pathways.
And I can say based on the communications that I do have access to and the output that we've had, that they were looking at concrete sidewalks. I don't have any indication that they were looking at any other options over there.
Cause even over here, the sidewalk that's done downtown, it is so close to the road. Like, I do not even let my kids walk on the sidewalk. They have to walk on the grass adjacent to the sidewalk, because literally, you know
And
how it
that's
is.
25, right?
Exactly.
So it's a totally different situation over here. I know I can't give you a dollar amount on the engineering there, but I know that a lot went into it. We have shovel-ready sidewalk projects because they are fully engineered at this point. But to your point, do we even know if a concrete sidewalk is, I wouldn't be able to attest to that. I don't think, I can say that that wasn't vetted in the research that I've seen, that it's been for concrete sidewalks.
Yeah.
So real quick, our meeting, when is our next meeting?
It's gonna be April 14th, so we're gonna meet together before April 14th.
Village council meeting
Village council meeting.
is the 14th.
Yep, and prior to that, we have another special meeting, starts at 4. So you're gonna go special meeting and then right into village council.
Sorry, you done, trustee Sally?
Yeah, the only thing is I do want.
Is that a budget meeting or a strategic planning meeting?
It's the same, it's scheduled the exact same as this.
I thought it was only if we had to have it. I thought
Correct.
there was like a,
It's scheduled, it's noticed. If we don't need it, then we would cancel it.
Or do we want to use it as a strategic planning meeting?
I
Right.
think we need to have it. And what I'm hearing today is what I can do
It's
for
already in the
you.
book.
Yeah, yeah. So I'd say we keep it, don't cancel it. What I can do for you for your next one, I think we're feeling pretty comfortable with where we were at with PD budget, which if you think about that is about half of your budget. So let's push that aside. And what I could do for you leading up to the 14th is get you a draft of what I would recommend for the rest of our budget. That would allow you an opportunity to look through that. Additionally, I will follow up with this HRC and how much we had paid over the last year and kind of where we were at as a benchmark for that. Then we come in on the 14th, you have my draft budget. We can talk further about priorities that you may have, and that would be a good time to, make changes and ask questions about a draft budget. In between now and then, when you're at home reading this light reading material before you fall asleep and you have a question that pops in your head or an idea or something, please email me. As much information as I can get to you before the 14th makes the 14th a more productive meeting. You do not have to save all your questions for the night of the 14th. I will keep record of them. I'll make sure I'm giving same information to everybody, but if you're at home focusing and working on this between now and then, reach out to me. I'm more than able to answer questions for you and get us a good spot on the 14th. The idea would be we leave the special meeting on the 14th, and you're all aware of kind of where we're gonna land on the budget that I will bring to you in May.
So I appreciate that. I like the forecasting. I liked both trustee Gates and trustee Hanson's questions of, I think each one of us should come, if we had to cut something from this budget, what would it be? And then the flip side to Abby's question of the things that have increased, where can we see the ROI? Because I think it's important to scrutinize. I mean, I was looking for revenue streams in the code. One of them, and I have to ask you, it doesn't seem like you need a permit for an estate sale, and if you do, it's $1. And these companies are making thousands of dollars off their estate sales every year in Franklin, and we're charging them $1. So I would like to have an ordinance to increase that $200 for 3 days, $150 for 3 days. If there's 30 estate sales, that's, like $5,000 that we could put towards training or Office 365 or collaboration tools or a social media strategist. Like things like that, I think are important, and they're not gonna appear from a budget. I scrutinize the charter, I'm looking at ordinances, I'm seeing what we're charging for permits, and I know there's very few revenue streams, but I go to these estate sales, they're big business in Franklin, so.
I would take it one step further than that. It's probably not a bad idea to look at your whole fee schedule And I know we had done it not that long ago to give you some comfort there. I think it had been within the last 3 to 5 years, but costs are continuing to rise. These need to be addressed. And a lot of municipalities have a practice where they look at the fee schedule right after the budget is passed each year. And then the fees are continually staying in line with where they should be. I don't know what the practice was for the last time that we looked at the schedule. I know it hasn't been that far. But I do know that there are permits that are $1 or $2 or, that it costs more in the employee's time to administer the permit than what we're receiving back. And I think that it could be a good exercise, if nothing else, to look at the fee schedule and look at where we're landing. When was the last time we increased it? What does it look like compared to other municipalities? I think that that's really healthy general upkeep and maintenance that you do within your government. I'm not under any impression that's been, overly neglected, but I do think it's time to talk about it again. So, there are caveats here, right? Building department fees need to be paid into the building department. You can't just, those aren't just regular revenue that we can grab. There are other administrative permits that are revenue sources. So I think that we could get through the budget season and then we could just look at the fee schedule.
To change a fee, is that a resolution by council or is it administrative action?
It's most of the time a resolution by council. There are some fees that I'm sure are administrative. I wouldn't be able to rattle those off by my head, but typically when I've handled this in the past in other places, you keep them all together. They go to council in a packet. It's the fee schedule. We're looking at it and doing it, and then it's one resolution where you're changing all of those fees. Then in the ordinance where they're individually mentioned, you remove that portion of the ordinance and say, see annual fee schedule. And then each year, we're updating the fee schedule. We're not amending an ordinance every year, and we're keeping our hand on where those are. It wouldn't be a terrible time to do that because you are still in the process of looking at all of your ordinances and codifying those. So if you were going to make a change like this, that could affect, a couple of different, now would be the time. Get that on the list of other changes that we're making there.
Are there any additional services we could offer as a village that would drive additional revenue?
Nothing that I could think of right now with a staff of 4.
Yeah.
That's
You're
the
not gonna
problem.
make money
Yes,
doing
I think there's a lot,
processing,
but
processing passports and stuff. The time would not justify the revenue, I would think.
those are things that, we can always be thinking about,
Yeah.
The other thing that's a really common trend that you see in local governments are there are other ways that we can be partnering with surrounding municipalities to share services.
Real quick, on that point, could we get a summary of services received from Southfield Township?
Yes.
Because again, I don't think people appreciate that we pay taxes for both Southfield Township and to the Village of Franklin. The reason we pay taxes to Southfield Township is for services, right? And so I don't think any of us have, personally, I'll speak for myself, don't have a good grasp of what those services are. And then the other thing too is, and again, I want to have, I think there's a couple of things that are in play here, which is one, a new administrator and then new council members. But, one of the things that I have been frustrated with is we are going towards, we're just over our general fund. We're dipping into the general fund year after year after year. Police budget is up 5%. Again, that's reasonable. We know cost increase. If we come out of a negotiation with a 5% increase, it's a really good negotiation, right? But I do wonder, I would love to have the finance committee be able to make recommendations and look at it holistically with the prerogative of we are dipping into the general fund, where are our opportunities? Because I think us looking at these line items is somewhat helpful, but it can also be very convoluted, right?
Agreed. And what I would say to kind of summarize that is it's important, we're not gonna fix the budget by looking at these line items. Because honestly, even me looking at them as kind of an outsider, because I wasn't here before, there are a couple of things that we need to talk about that we could move around or reprioritize. But what we have here is a revenue problem, not an expenditure problem for the most part. We need to figure out, we had not as a government been keeping up with the times and keeping up with the fact that we needed more revenue coming in, that we were continually spending more than we were bringing in, and that things were changing. And so no amount of us going through this line by line is gonna fix that problem. You're still gonna dip into your general fund at the end of this year. Our projection will still be 2029, you're gonna be running into the black. And that is because
Into the red.
because we need a revenue solution. We need to figure out a way to bring in more.
I would guess, I would equally say though that, I think what we're alluding to is outside of some innovative, and not to say that we're not gonna land on it, but way of increasing revenues outside of taxes, that us going to taxpayers without going to at least put out to bid again, right? And say concretely, here is our contracted services. We, within the past year to 2 years, have gone and contracted, it's got the whatever standard we want to apply, whether it be lowest or best, whatever. But I think that there's a narrative that we have to build that we have yet to do.
I think that yes, and I think take that one step further, I think that you just have a lot of contracts that it's time to refresh and go out to bid. So in my head, we get through our budget season, we get through our PD contract negotiations, I get through my first 6 months here, we enter into summertime. Angelina had already asked for us to start compiling these contracted services that we're receiving, and I've been collecting those as I'm going through these processes. And then I think that we start looking at those and deciding what we're gonna take out to bid. We have some great contracts that going out to bid is still not a problem. Like, take it out to bid. If that consultant comes in and they're still like lowest and best, then that's great, And I feel firmly that we have some of those here.
Of course.
But we also have other contracts that haven't been looked at in a while or have gone to their auto renew, and so maybe they've been looked at in one-off years, but for the most part we've kept, and things have changed. Things have changed so much in services and the cost and everything in the last 3 years. I think that it would be a good goal for us this summer in a finance committee to work through our contracts and to decide what needs to go out to bid and put it out to bid.
Yeah.
It's work to put it out to bid, but I think it's worth it for us. And if at the end of the day, we find that we had the lowest or best, then great. For me, I think as your administrator, as the person who would be spending the time to take it out to bid, even if we ended up with our same contractors, but had taken it out and collected that data, we would have more peace of mind. And to your point, that would be something that we would be able to talk to our residents about.
Yeah, absolutely.
Well, just since we've spent some time talking about HRC, that's an example of another variation on that theme, which
sure.
is they are treated like a contractor. We have no contract with them. We have never had a contract with HRC, and we should. If we're going to treat them as our village.
We don't have a BPA with them?
No, we don't. Never did. They're excellent sellers. If you think about relationship selling, they're so good at it. But I'm absolutely excited and happy that you paused any work that they're doing so you could take a step back. We should be looking not only at service providers that we have a contract with, we should be looking at service providers that are providing service that we don't have a working arrangement with. And a policy matter for this council should be, should we?
So are you saying that we don't know how much we're going to pay them when we direct them to do work?
It's all on a piece basis.
So it's all just Tina.
It's just, it's when we ask for something, that is the person, that is the company that was called.
And do they give us a cost estimate before we agree to
Yes.
have them do the work?
They do. To my knowledge.
I've seen a lot of cost estimates.
But does someone double check the bill to the cost estimate and make sure there's no gap there?
I don't
Probably
think, I
not.
think that trickles right down to why are we paying invoices from March and November?
Yeah.
think
I
that's
don't
right.
think that had been, a priority that was managed in the way that it did, hence me slowing that way down until I feel comfortable that that's all checking out there. I also will reiterate, we need to look for other ways to be partnering with surrounding municipalities to share services.
Yeah.
Because we're not the only ones in this boat.
In-
Bingham Farms is in this boat, to some extent Beverly Hills is in this boat, you know? And we all do different things really well. And we see a lot of partnership between us and Bingham Farms right now. And honestly, I think those partnerships are working. I think they're really beneficial for both of our communities. What other ways are there that we can be doing that? Maybe it's a service Franklin provides, maybe it's, you know, something else we're working for. General trends in governments are to look for more shared services and stop double dipping in all of these departments in unilateral governments. And so I think as we move forward, that would be a trend or a theme that I would also be exploring.
Can you give examples of like the shared services? Just, it might be a dumb question, but when you say, like, what would we offer versus Bingham versus Beverly? Like, what exactly do you mean?
So we give Bingham Farm, I mean, they pay for it, the fire department and their police department. Ooh, Bingham Farms doesn't have a building department. We have our own building department. Bingham Farms goes to Southfield Township for their fire department, or for their building department. We don't have a DPW. We contract out with Jerry, and he provides those services. He does a little bit of that in Bingham Farms, but Bingham Farms also gets a lot of infrastructure support from Beverly Hills. So they pay Beverly Hills to work on roads to some extent and water infrastructure. So it's stuff like that. They're
Dispatch services.
patch services are Beverly Hills for Bingham Farms. So it's stuff like that. Now, Bingham Farms is going through a transition right now too. Not to bring them into our conversation, but with them going through a transition and us starting a new era and us both already relying on each other for certain services, it might make sense right now for us to look at holistically what's going where, who, because we're so small, we can't do everything, so who are we paying to do these other things? And are there ways that we could save money by partnering with our surrounding municipalities?
I love this conversation, and the lack of procurement oversight makes me shake, because it's just something that I feel like is easy for governments to fall into, and it's a very big area of waste for governments. But one of the things that I think, I honestly don't trust any procurement that was done before Mike came on. So just like, I agree with you in that, like,
Before who came on?
before Mike came on, like Meg.
Meg.
Like that,
Oh,
any of the
Meg.
procurements were properly solicited. No,
I didn't know who Mike.
we're, before Meg, like I don't, based on what I've seen, that they were properly solicited, properly vetted, properly evaluated, properly paid, properly scoped, properly confirmed, properly extended. So to your point, like I love, you know, some might be lowest price technically acceptable, some might be best value. Like if you're cutting our lawn, we don't care how you cut our lawn, you know, if you match these technical elements. But if you're providing building services, that's a different story. You want best value because you want to have a quality vendor for those. But what I was also looking at was the Krieger House. It's
Yes.
like over 20,000 a year.
Yes.
Just to maintain, I think closer to 30 with the generator, the tech, the maintenance, all of that. And then we bring in about 1,000. And so, similar to what you would do with like a pool club in the summer, you know, possibly just have it open in the spring, you know, like April to October, April to September, even if it saves a few 10,000 a year, you know, like make sure the pipes don't burst. Obviously pool clubs, they drain the water and all of that, and we're in close proximity. But just like that $10,000. And then also the allocation that we get from the FCA for the maintenance of the lawn.
Yes.
Do we maintain their lawn?
Yes.
Okay, because they publicize and promote that that dues go to maintenance of their lawn, and they haven't been paying for that. So that's something that I would like to recoup. And if we're going to maintain their lawn, then we should look at getting an easement for their property. And I think that's,
One question that I did, since you brought up sunset maintenance, we're paying roughly $12,000, fine, $11,000, for janitorial services.
Yes. It's-
Well, actually, so there's janitorial services provided by Sunset Maintenance, and then and that's on building and grounds.
Yep.
And so janitorial services, I would assume, would be for the bathrooms out there. But then
And-
there's an additional 11,000 that's just the Sunset Maintenance.
Sunset Maintenance provides the weekly maintenance of this building, of the PD, and of the public restrooms out there. And the Krieger House.
do we know if ever FCA has reimbursed us for that?
No, not to my knowledge.
Okay. And then one more thing,
I just would add, I think something to take a look at is when the village assumed that
Cost, that maintenance.
Because I'm not sure it's always been that way, and what we don't know is, like, is it 5 years ago, is it yesterday? I don't know when it was. But you're right, they advertise that they
Maintain and insure.
They maintain and insure it, and I have been in conversation with the baseball league on some possible improvements to the ball fields as a project, and they were very, the baseball league, they do all of their own maintenance of the ball fields.
And we
And
could
we're
work
The
grass.
FCA doesn't do anything.
So what is the FCA?
So-
they insure it?
Yeah, so what, what?
Nothing.
Oh, yeah. Anyway, I don't wanna go,
No, these are
but
really
it's-
healthy conversations, and listen, this year's budget is really it's not a bells and whistles. This is gonna be, clean up where we can and maintain and get us through the next year. We're not gonna have a bunch of fancy initiatives, cause the funds just aren't there right now, and I wanna get us to a good point. But these conversations will extend beyond the budget season. I'm not gonna have solutions for all of this by April 14th for a draft budget, but these need to stay as ongoing conversations throughout the year. They need to help lead us into our following budget cycle after that. And this summer is, historically in government, summer is a really good time to start tackling big projects because you've just made it through your budget season, you're starting fresh in a fiscal year. Capacity wise, it's normally there. So in my head, when we're getting through budget season, we're wrapping up everything that we've had like in the last 6 months, we're entering a new era. We're gonna get into our summer and taking a deep dive into where we are contracting out services, incredibly important. Understanding the relationship between maintaining the green, the FCA and the village, incredibly important. These are all good, tasks for me to be chasing in the next few months, and just because we're going to hopefully get to a point where we can adopt a budget doesn't mean that this conversation has to stop there.
Sorry, and to that point, I don't want you to be chasing everything because that's not productive of your time. But I think it would be helpful if there was a issue tracking document that we could all see, and then high, medium, low priority. So like, if you're chasing the FCA, like that's honestly probably low, priority at this point. But high would be like understanding, what contracts we could save on. You know what I mean? So like, we talk about a lot of things and we won't remember them
Yes.
month to month or week to week. But if you could put like a document on SharePoint or something, and so we can see like, oh, like I know personally, because you keep in touch with me, like when I asked you for that procurement list, like I know you're tracking it, but like that's, low priority compared to police negotiations. So at least I can say like, I don't need to ask her about it again because she's tracking it, but it's 60 days out, because I haven't,
Yes.
I know that inherited an expired police contract, and that was something you had to spend 3 months doing, you know, but like, you know, like you said, these are all things you want to chase, but, you know, I'm cognizant that like, you don't just want to be squirreling around, you know, so.
I actually really like that idea too, because as you know, we can have a great plan for how I'm gonna spend my next 3 months, and then something crazy is gonna happen, and it's gonna hijack an entire week of my work week, right? And normally we find a resolution and we move right on, and that might not be something that reaches a threshold of a council meeting, but this document would allow you to say, oh, actually, we didn't even know that that was going on, but Meg was busy. Oh, of course that became top priority and she had to do that. And of course that took a significant amount of time. I don't know. For me, it doesn't, I'm not getting a micromanagement vibe. I'm getting a communication vibe. And since my time is limited, I am but one person, and I only have 4 staff members. There's only so much that we can do in a day, and it takes one random thing to happen that needs all of our attention to hijack 3 days worth of something else. So that communication, I think, could be really important, and it also would allow us to see our running list and not forget things or be able to talk about that. I really like that idea, so let me brainstorm and think of an effective format for that. You know, it wouldn't be something where I'm putting tons of details in there, but it's just showing you kind of where I've been the last, you know, where we're spending time and what direction we're moving in. And those are all conversations that typically happen outside individually of a council meeting. I agree. I like that idea. Give me some time to play with a format and take it out to you guys and see how you think, and we can work on that as a living document. But I think that that could be really helpful for us to tackle some of these long-term projects at a time, because really we haven't talked about it until right now, which is budget season. We're limited time and we need to keep going, you know? Okay.
A couple weeks ago, you gave us materials and priorities, and our agenda today was to talk about priorities. I'd like to do that for
Yeah.
for a few minutes anyway.
Time out. Can I get control of my own meeting for 1 second? So, I'm not done on this dialogue, okay? And we're not going into that with 10 minutes left in our
What
meeting.
dialogue?
Our budget dialogue.
Oh, I
So-
thought we were-
Well, we have another meeting coming up. There's a couple things that I need to
Yes.
get my hands around, okay?
Yep.
We have 2 funds in our village. One is called the Garbage and Rubbish Fund, which has hundreds of thousands of dollars in it. And we have a building department fund that has almost $700,000 in it.
Yes.
I need to get my hands around how those funds operate. I've asked this question for a decade about the building department fund.
Yep.
Oh, well, that money's gotta be there because if there's ever a rainy day and the revenues don't come in like they are, we'll need it. Well, I don't know a rainy day where we're gonna be $700,000 short. So I need to understand why we have $700,000 sitting around in a building department fund and how that money, is it statutory, is it
Yes.
resolution, what is it? And how do we get at it? 2, garbage and rubbish. We just signed a contract that doubled our rubbish expense. We have rubbish millage of 3, which is rolled down to 1.79, which we bill 0.54 of. I need to make sure 0.54 is covering every single penny of this $200,000 increase, or else we're raising our rubbish tax.
Absolutely. Yes.
And
And
that's something we don't have to ask anybody to do.
no, we do that on our
But we just
402.
doubled our rubbish contract, and I
Yep.
don't see anywhere where we've gone back and increased our rubbish revenue.
So Plant Moran looked at it last year when you did your 4029. They are looking at it again for this year. Plant Moran will also be here on the night of the 14th. But I will have that information for you, and when I get it, I'll distribute it before the
I
meeting.
mean, that's
so
almost
that
$1
you
million
have it.
sitting around in a
Yep.
bank account.
But definitely in regards to that, we have to be covering all garbage and rubbish from the millage. There's no reason to not. We kind of have a giant millage out there that we rightfully so have not been collecting the full amount on, but it bare minimum needs to be taking care of those
Or,
costs.
in the alternate, if there's this money sitting in a rubbish account, then let's go use that and restockpile that and lower we wanna help our residents anywhere, then lower it for now.
Yep,
Being that we could have to be going back to them in the future for other, but I just need to understand how these two major fund balances just sit there and we can't do anything with it.
yep. And the building department, you're absolutely right, those are different funds, but I can put together a summary of why they're there and
And I know
how we
we've
use them.
discussed there's gotta be a way, you charge something, salaries, let's start moving salaries into that department.
Yeah.
There's gotta be things we can do to start using money that's, I don't think we're ever gonna be able to use.
We wouldn't be able to use it. And so last year, Susan and Plant Moran was for the first time started really nitpicking salaries and what's coming out of the building department because we're a small staff. It's not uncommon for Susan to be the backup for the building department. How many hours a week is she doing that? How many hours a month is she doing that? Why isn't a portion of that salary being paid for by the building department? And it is right now. But last year was the first time that they started doing that. And I don't know to what extent we looked at it totally comprehensively. So those are all really, that's good feedback. We can look at that and have more information for our next meeting.
Okay, so that was it. Last. I don't know if everybody knows, sitting in the crowd with us today, Rick Kozlowski is the treasurer for the fire department. Rick, were you here just to sit in, or did you want to address us on anything?
was here just as an interested citizen.
Okay,
to watch
perfect.
the process.
Awesome, great.
But thank you.
And obviously, we'll still have work to do with you guys, but I wasn't sure if you wanted to address us or not. Awesome, thanks for being here.
Nice to meet you.
Now, I'm sorry.
Thank you.
Now,
for
if you want to sneak in 10 minutes of discussion now, 'cause, I mean, I don't care, we're already here.
Yeah.
I was attempting to help you get control of this meeting by going to what the purpose of this meeting was in the first place, which was the PD budget.
Yes.
And village priorities.
Right, well,
My
yeah.
simple question is, have we agreed on the priorities? Are the items that you gave us the priorities? Where I recall we left off at the priority setting meeting was, here's some ideas and some background, here's what you said in 2023. We made a few stabs at expensive priorities and inexpensive priorities with Bill, but we never really tied them to the budget. You were asking for alignment between priorities and the budget. Do you have what you want? And what else do we need to do to give you what is needed to have that alignment? That's my question.
Fair question. So what I provided you with were what my assumption of past priorities had been. I was not attempting to define your priorities. I was just trying to compile the information for what appeared to be priorities in the last few years. The goal was that you'll review those, and maybe something that wasn't even in that book is a priority that you'd like to talk about. And then during these meetings, we would have discussions where you advocate for your priority and get consensus from your other council members so I can build that into your budget. At this point, I haven't made any budget allocations other than PD. So it's not that it is the right time to do this. But what would be helpful for me is if individually and as a council together, you could decide what's important to you as a priority, what would you like to see in this budget, and then see if you can get some consensus from your fellow council members so then I have direction to build it into your budget.
When do you want to do that?
I thought we were doing it on the 14th,
Yeah, the 14th is our next scheduled time to do that, so,
4 to 6.
I thought it was today. We had other very good discussion.
yep.
I'm just getting
PD went
clear,
much,
so I
yeah,
understand.
PD and budget discussion went, I think we're figuring an hour today, and
Yeah.
it's not how it worked out. But now that we covered so much in the budget, I really think, and I know this is, you both are big on getting this done, so I am calling that 4 to 6 on the 14th a priority meeting.
Yep.
And if we run out of priorities, then we can spend another 10 minutes on budget, but inverse.
I like
Yeah.
that. In return.
And that gives us all 2 weeks to think about the questions you've posed,
It
which are,
does.
what are we gonna bring to Meg?
And in return, I've got a list of follow-up items here, so in the next 2 weeks, I'm gonna be compiling those and getting those to you so that you have information when you're thinking about your priorities. We're gonna focus on the 14th at identifying what council's priorities are, so I have direction for the budget. But in the meantime, I'm going to be giving you more budget information, because this is fluid, we have to keep moving in order to stay on our time frame. So I have a bunch of follow-up stuff. Check your emails, watch for me to give you that, and in return, if you have budget questions that aren't priority questions or priority questions, email me throughout the week. Email me before the 14th. Let's see if I can get you comfortable with the information you need to be able to talk to your fellow council members on the 14th, and we can collectively decide on some priorities.
Can I ask one final question? I want to make sure too that you're getting what you need for your role, from us. So we're looking at a budget, but if there are skills or functions or, you know, things that you need in order to better run your operations here in the village, we would like to know that, you know, because you bring a different skill set to the village, and I think that's important that you have the functions that complement that skill set or fill the gap. And you're really good at, you know, engaging and budgeting and oversight and those things that you feel like you don't get a good ROI of your time, you should be outsourcing, you know? So like, we don't know all the things that you need in order to run the processes and that day-to-day of your village, but it's important that we get you what you need, because we always ask you to get us what we need, and it's a feedback loop on a two-way street. So.
I appreciate that feedback. What I will also commit to bringing to the 14th is what I would anticipate some budget asks from administration would be, or what my priorities would be for, from an administrative perspective and less from an overarching council perspective. That is good information. I appreciate having the opportunity to talk about that. Of course, I've got like a little list of running, so that seems like a good time to do that. So between now and the 14th, watch for lots of emails back and forth from me. I'm here to answer questions for you or hop on a phone call to provide any information we need. I'm going to do my best to be sharing information equally across all trustees, and we'll plan on coming here on the 14th at 4 o'clock to talk about our priorities and see if we can set some. And then once, if that's healthy and we're through that conversation, if we have some budget follow-up, we'll do it. At the end of the day, if we're not ready to bring a budget in May, that's okay. We can bring it in June. I've built us a 30-day buffer. I just don't want us to repeat what we did last year, and that's why I'm targeting this May. But if we're still engaging in really active conversation, it's no loss to then push the budget back to June and approve it in June. We're still on time. So I just don't want us to get to June and still have more discussion. That's what we need to try to mitigate. So I appreciate everybody's time today. And I think we had a lot of good discussion. I've got a whole page of follow-up stuff, so over the next few days I'll be taking care of that. I am out of town Thursday, Friday, and Monday. I'm in Florida, so I will be back in the office on Tuesday. Susan will be here, and so will Chief the whole time, taking care of that, and I'm still available on my phone. Okay?
Thank you.
Cool.
Thanks, Mike.
Thank you.
All right, we'll adjourn.